Hello everyone and welcome to week 12. This week we are going to look at another short story. It is a Gothic horror story. It is called The Telltale Heart and it was written by Edgar Allan Poe. Now in today's lesson, the objectives are you should be able to recognize the features of the Gothic genre. You should be able to define the term foreshadowing. You should be able to predict the events in the text and you should be able to summarize the story once you have read it. Now, what I would like you to do is I would like you to answer these questions in your head. So the first question I will ask you is, have you heard the word Gothic before? Does it ring a bell? Did you hear someone talk about it or did you hear it being mentioned on the TV? I want you to think, what do you think this word actually means? And can you come up with a definition? So on a piece of paper, write what you think Gothic means. So after you have written your definition of Gothic, let's hope it matches the definition that I have here. So Gothic is actually a term that can be used to describe certain types of architecture and literature. What I mean by architecture is buildings. So it comes from the name from a group of people from Germany in the Middle Ages who were known as the Goths. You might have heard this word recently, maybe to describe a group of people who wear dark clothing. They may have long hair and might be interested in like metallic or metal music or rock music. But what we did there is we looked at the term Gothic. What we're going to focus now on is the Gothic literature genre. So the Gothic genre has been popular at various times for centuries. So authors like to write stories in the Gothic genre. There are certain characteristics that Gothic stories share. And what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on the setting. So we're going to look at some pictures and that will give you some ideas about where Gothic stories are set. So this would be a very stereotypical setting for a Gothic story. So you have the dark, creepy sky. It's in a forest, and there is an old, creepy church and a graveyard. So that's a common setting for a Gothic genre story. Another one, common setting is a castle. So anything that is creepy, okay, anything that is scary, haunted, that would be a common setting for a Gothic story. You can also have monsters. So monsters are quite popular in Gothic stories. So, for example, I'm sure you've all heard of the story Frankenstein. So that is a Gothic story. So it focuses on like the supernatural. So Frankenstein was like a monster. Another example there is like Gothic stories can be set in like graveyards. Uh, these birds that you see there, ravens, very common in Gothic stories as they're associated with death. And also, you will find lots of superstitions in Gothic stories. So you can see the black cat there. Some people think that black cats may give you some bad luck. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. We're going to look at Gothic literature and we're going to focus on the settings, the atmosphere of Gothic stories, and the omens and the supernatural that appear in Gothic stories. So, the common settings, as we have discussed, of Gothic stories are generally they happen in the past. So they happen in the 1800s, in a period called the Victorian era. So generally, Gothic stories are situated or they happen in the past. So they will generally, I'm speaking generally here, they will have Gothic architecture in it, so castles, manors, abandoned places, caves, and wilderness. So they are the common settings of a Gothic story. Atmosphere is the feeling or emotions or mood that an author creates through using descriptive language. So if you ever watch like a horror film, you will notice that the events are always like dubbed with creepy music. So you'll hear creepy music in the background that adds to the mystery and suspense. So if you're reading a novel, like a horror novel, like the suspense or atmosphere is created through the actions of the character. So maybe the character is walking through a dark, creepy graveyard. There is creepy sounds. So that should be completely different. For example, if you're watching a comedy film, so Like the music in a comedy film will be upbeat and cheerful. The actions of the characters, so if you're reading a funny story, so the actions of the character, it would not be creepy or scary in a comedy story or a comedic story. So the atmosphere is created through how you describe the actions of the character or how you create the setting in the story. So Gothic stories, generally the atmosphere is quite mysterious. It's full of suspense. There's quite a lot of fear in Gothic stories as you are trying to figure out what will happen next. Will the character die? A lot of finger biting moments in Gothic stories. Gothic stories always contain elements of foreshadowing. So the authors always put in little clues to let you know what is going to happen next. So that is what foreshadowing is. There's quite a lot of emotion, high emotions in Gothic stories. So characters are getting scared, they're feeling sad, they're feeling terrified. One moment they're happy and unoblivious to what is going to happen next, and then one moment later they could be all nearly dying. There's also quite a lot of intrigue and the unexplained in Gothic stories, so you'll have to read from chapter to chapter to find out what is going to happen next. It's really interesting. Now, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at foreshadowing. So, this is a common literary device in which a writer gives a hint of what is to come later in the story. Foreshadowing is very, very common in Gothic literature. Foreshadowing often appears at the beginning of a story or a chapter and helps the reader develop expectations about the coming events in a story. So it will give you a clue as to what will happen next. So there are various ways to create foreshadowing. And in addition, any event or action in the story may throw a hint to the readers about future events or actions. So foreshadowing in fiction creates an atmosphere of suspense. So very, very common in Gothic literature, so the readers are interested to know more. And I have listed some examples below of foreshadowing. So these are sentences from stories. So the final graveyard flower is blooming, and it smells drifts through their house, speaking gently the names of their dead. So that foreshadows that maybe death is going to occur in the coming chapters. Another example, the evening was still. Suddenly a cool breeze started blowing and made a windy night. So that is foreshadowing or giving you a clue that a thunderstorm may happen in the coming chapters. And the last one there, the most awful thing happened on a stormy evening. The battle between good and evil started. So you should be reading that and be thinking in your head, okay, in the next coming chapters, something dangerous is going to happen. So foreshadowing, I will repeat it again, is a technique used by writers to create suspense. It is a very, very common technique in Gothic literature. Now, also, what you will spot in the Gothic literature genre, it's very common that the story will contain visions or dreams. It's very common that the characters may be vampires, witches, there could be superstitions, there could be spells. Everything is unusual in a Gothic literature story. So it's there to keep you interested, to keep you intrigued. They are very, very interesting stories to read. This man you see here on the left-hand side, his name is Edgar Allan Poe. So he is the author of the story that we are going to read, Telltale Heart. So he is a very prominent writer in the Gothic literature genre. So he was born in 1809 and died in 1849. He had a very hard life, and that influenced his writing. So if you look on the left-hand side, so he was orphaned and he was taken in. He tried to be an army officer, but he failed. So we're talking 1809 here. So he married his cousin at 13 years of age. Then unfortunately she died of tuberculosis. And then he was basically poor. Even though he was a successful author, he was poor. So he did not earn a lot of money. And then there is suspicion that he ended his own life, maybe as a result of drinking too much or taking drugs, or he had TB. So his life influenced him, and he focused on a dark and sad subject matter. So he didn't really have a happy life, and that influenced his writing. So he was always, sometimes he was depressed, he was unhappy, sad, and that influenced his writing. That's why he focused on creating horror stories. Now let's have a look at what I am expecting you to do for Sunday. So I want you to read the story. I want you to answer the prediction questions as you read the text. It's very important that you do that. I want you to underline or highlight the examples of foreshadowing that you find in the story. And then I want you to summarize the story in 5 bullet points. I am focusing here on 5 bullet points. Do not go past 5 bullet points. I only want you to include the 5 most important aspects or events in the story. So what I have here are the questions, the prediction questions that I want you to do as you read the story. These questions are also on the worksheet, so you can flick through this slide as fast as you want. Please pay particular attention. I have numbered the paragraphs of your story, so you'll be able to just flick to the corresponding paragraph to answer the questions. So it should be a nice and simple task. So you can just flick through these questions or just look at your worksheet and answer. Same again, just flick through them and answer the question. Same thing again, I want you to read the questions and then answer the questions as you read the story. You also have these questions on the worksheet, so you can either use the PowerPoint or just use the worksheet. And then once you have read the story, I want you to go and check were your predictions correct. And then I want you to write on your worksheet a summary of the main events of the story. Only use 5 bullet points. If you have any questions, please contact your teacher on Google Classroom and have a good day.